Hello, I'm Jason Weinberger, Pauline Barrett, Artistic Director of WCF Symphony, debuting our newest digital series, Radio Hour. Of course, now during the midst of the pandemic, we've been turning online to provide content for you, and this is something we thought would be a lot of fun since I love to listen to recordings. I've got a big library, and one of my favorite things to do is discover and rediscover wonderful performances that were put on tape, various different formats, hoping at some point we could even do some vinyl, but we'll stick with digital for now. We've developed a format where I'll introduce a couple of recordings and then you can listen to them in order on our YouTube playlist. This allows us to draw a large amount of music and even feature full movements and full pieces. We couldn't do that in any other format. So we're hoping this works, but we want to hear your feedback and let us know what you think both of the format and the content. We're going to start our first radio hour with Beethoven. Of course, we're right in the middle of Beethoven 250, which is our week-long festival devoted to the composer who's celebrating 250 years since his birth. Orchestras all over the place doing Beethoven stuff this year, and we've got a really intriguing set of events for you to enjoy as well. So we're going to go back and hear some Beethoven recordings that have been meaningful for me over the years, or simply just caught my ear and might be a little different from the ones that you know. I've divided the program up into a couple of segments, so for each of those I'll do a short introduction, and then you can feel free to listen through all of the recordings or just sample them, or you can skip right over to the next introduction, whatever you prefer. So we'll start with the symphonies, and of course there are just thousands of recordings of Beethoven symphonies. You can go all the way back to the earliest recorded conductors, people like Toscanini and others, and then they're still being recorded today in all kinds of really interesting ways. And so I wanted to select a couple of different recordings that highlight some different approaches to Beethoven symphonies and ones that just capture my imagination. So we begin with the first one, which is a legendary recording of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony by Carlos Kleiber. And a lot of people think this is the greatest recording of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Many people believe this recording is perhaps the greatest interpretation of any Beethoven symphony. I'm not sure I would say that, but this recording really stands above for me when I think about the classic recordings. And I remember in school when I was first learning Beethoven's Fifth Symphony as a conductor, I think all of us turned to this recording just to learn, if nothing else. Carlos Kleiber was a really remarkable individual and didn't make a lot of commercial recordings, so it's actually pretty interesting that we've got this one to listen to. From there, we'll go off in a different direction. We're going to hear a recording of the Fourth Symphony, the scherzo movement, the allegro movement from that. And this recording is by orchestra from Bruges called Anima Eterna. And they do a lot of really interesting work performing on period instruments. What's really fascinating about their Beethoven recordings is that they play them on period instruments. Those are instruments that are reconstructed to resemble the instruments from Beethoven's time. But instead of the typical approach on period instruments, which is to play at a lower pitch, and primarily that's because this whole movement started in the Baroque era, the Renaissance and Baroque eras, where sort of the period instrument movement started. And a lot of that movement was played at lower pitch. But according to the research of the director of Anima Eterna, which is a guy named Josvani Mirzel, he believes that the orchestras in Beethoven's time played at 440 pitch, which is modern pitch. So this is quite unique to hear period instruments playing at modern pitch, and that's the approach that this group takes. They also have a wonderful way of bringing a lot of the incisiveness, the clarity of period instrument playing to this music, which for many years wasn't really treated much by early music experts. I remember hearing my first performance of Beethoven led by a period instrument performer. That was Roger Norrington. And it was just amazing. I couldn't believe it. Maybe 20, 25 years ago, I heard a live performance by him. Since then, I've been very interested in hearing performances of classical and even romantic music by these artists. And so I think you'll have something quite different to listen to when you flip from Kleiber's recording of the Fifth over to Anima Eterna and the Fourth. Then we stick with another period instrument conductor who maybe has a little bit of a broader sound palette than our prior artist. This artist is named Philipp Herwegh, and he is very well known in the Baroque period instrument movement, but he's done quite a bit of other work, and his recordings of Beethoven symphonies are interesting in the sense that they have many of the same qualities as a period instrument recording. That clarity, a little bit more of the dryness in the sound, a lot of that related to the materials and the construction of the instruments. But he also brings in a more lush and modern sensibility and mixes the two together in a really interesting way. And I also think he's just one of the most creative minds in terms of approaching the actual interpretation. So I picked a movement of the Seventh Symphony, the opening movement, and I think you can hear his range in this movement, and that's one of the reasons I picked it. I really like his recordings. I hadn't listened to too many of his Beethoven interpretations, but I did have this one on disc, and really I liked it a lot for a number of years and revisited it for this program. I hadn't listened to it in a while. I think you'll enjoy it. Then again, we take one more turn for our last symphonic Beethoven recording, and this is by a group called the Taschenphilharmonie, which is it translates into English as the Pocket Symphony. And they did a set of Beethoven symphonies. I think it's called Beethoven Revisited, and they play the symphonies with an incredibly small group. It's reduced down to basically one player per part. You can perform these in a smaller ballroom type space, maybe more similar to what Beethoven was accustomed. But what I really like about it is it just introduces, in a lot of ways, a different color, a different quality to the music. And so you're going to hear some of Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony performed by this group, and I think this is the perfect Beethoven symphony for this group because the Pastoral Symphony really has this sort of amazing intimate quality to it. And that's what I wanted you to be able to hear as you listen to this. So go ahead, immerse yourself for a little bit in some of these symphonic Beethoven recordings, and we'll come back in a few with the next segment.